Great, thank you, everybody. So a few weeks ago, I was at Christmas with my extended family, and I heard one of my relatives mention to somebody else that they had just read an article about blockchain and food. And we all have this relative who, as soon as they read one article, they become the foremost expert on everything. That was this relative. And so I decided to stay out of the conversation because, frankly, I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere well. I got home, though, and I was really interested in what article that they had read. So I decided to Google this, and I really opened up Pandora's box. And so I wanted to share with this group, to start, some of the things that I found when I started to Google this. So Forbes is talking about, food waste and hunger and how blockchain is going to address that. The food maybe that I was eating that day was actually verified by blockchain? No way. It's going to save our industry $31 billion. Countries are starting to tap into this. Killer bacteria is being put away. It's going to reshape the food industry. China's getting involved. Is it ready to serve the industry? Thailand's getting engaged with rice. Adoption is growing. Big data is involved in this. Wait a second, did it peak? Did we miss it? Serialization is going to be important. Is it going to help the companies who have big brands around sustainability? All of a sudden now we've raised it by $100 billion since the previous article that I had. You start to see that traceability software becomes important, and food is going digital. Now, this is really the hype of blockchain. And for you to know, this was only articles that I found within a 3-week span within December. And I didn't get past the second page of Google search because I felt like this probably got the point across to everybody and I didn't need to add more. All of our companies and industry is facing this today. There are articles being written, there are people talking about this technology. And it is a really important technology, but we have to remember it is a technology first. And there are a lot of things that we're going to talk about today that allow us to really get to the points where we can get to more of a principles-based approach when we talk about blockchain. As mentioned, my name is Eric Parkin. I work for Cargill. I lead a business within Cargill where we are working on technology solutions that we are bringing to the industry, the food industry and the food ecosystem. Our goal is to look at ways that we can make a safer, more transparent food ecosystem. And we're doing this through technologies like blockchain, where my team is developing solutions on this. We're working on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data capabilities. And it's really important as we get into the conversation today is to think about the impacts that this has on our industry going forward and how we come together as an industry to solve for some of this. Now, as I take a step back and think a little bit about where some of these topics are coming from, improving traceability, food safety, as I think about the more transparent supply chains that are being asked, a lot of people are really looking, our consumers are really looking for a trusted system to get food from here to here. And this is where we get to hear the terms like farm to fork, farm to table. I think I just heard one that was called earth to eat. I'm not really sure what that means, but you get the point. This is where we really are starting to talk about how products are getting from that nice couple who were walking through their farm smiling to the point where we're getting it through our supermarkets and grocery stores. But the reality is what happens in between that. This group knows that there's a lot that happens. And there's a lot of things in our industry today that need to be solved for other than the technology. So I want to take you through a few of those things that we need to first be thinking about. The first is privacy. And no, I'm not talking about chickens wanting to have a private space in a nice field like this. What I'm talking about is our industry's really, when we think about blockchain, inherently its role is to create transparency. And so everybody that's involved in the chain has access to view the data that everybody else is transacting on. And so I've sat in rooms with our customers, our competitors, partners, our customers, competitors, and we all sit around a table and we start talking about what data do we want to put in the chain and what are we looking to distribute amongst ourselves. And we talk about, okay, maybe product information. Sure, there's GS1 standards that standardize product information, and then we start talking about quantities of products that we're exchanging. And quickly it becomes, we cannot let our competitors see quantities that we're selling to our customers. That would not be good. And then we start talking about price. Nope, we cannot share price. And we start talking about delivery times and dates and things like this, and quickly you start to see is that as we start to share data more openly amongst a network, the data that we really can share openly and publicly is very, very small. And so we have to think about how we're creating private networks that allow us to still exchange data through multi-party opportunities, but not compromising the business case and the reasons why we are trying to create this network. The second problem that we need to be thinking about is the data debt that we've incurred. I can't speak for everybody's company or industry here. I can tell you as a 155-year-old company, we have built up some data debt. We have acquired companies that bring their own software systems, and we've built data on top of data on top of data, and we've had to structure it. And Cargill has put a big focus on how we are starting to structure data, but we're only scratching the surface. As all of us, I'm sure that we've exchanged spreadsheets. I'm sure that we know, hey, that data is actually not correct. Like, talk to Tom. Tom knows all the right stuff, and he'll get it figured out. Unfortunately, Tom's brain, so far, cannot go on the blockchain. And I think that's things that we need to be thinking about is the data debt that each of our companies and industries have incurred so far. The next is, and last, is the complex supply chains. As I previously talked about the farm to fork notions, I think that in a lot of cases we have oversimplified the food supply chain when it's being talked about in the public. People talk about this great idea that if I can just be able to see my product and where it came from and know that that's what is in my product, everything will make me feel better and it's more trusted. The reality is, the supply chain of food is very, very complex. If I use the example of cocoa beans, for example, a small farmer in West Africa will be getting their cocoa pods, and they will be the beans. They'll harvest that. They will deliver that to a co-op. The co-op is taking cocoa beans from multiple smallholder farmers from around the region. They're collecting that together, putting it in bags. Those bags, companies like Cargill come and purchase from the co-op while we're purchasing from other co-ops around the country. We load that into a massive vessel. We move that to Amsterdam. We process that amongst other places that we've purchased cocoa beans. And you quickly see that notion of being able to get exactly back to the farm and understanding that, like, this chocolate bar came from this farm is very difficult in the supply chains that we have today. You can think about vertically integrated supply chains that we have, and people are working towards that. But is that effective? Is that a way that we're going to feed the world in 30 years? We have to think about the supply chains that we have today, and they're very complex. So, those are some of the things we're facing. Do we still want to digitally enable our supply chain? It's a lot to face. The short answer is yes. I really believe that what we are on the cusp of with this type of technology is a generational technology. 30 years from now, people are going to look back at this moment in time, and they're going to talk about the groups that we are all interacting in and talking about how we had to make some very, very difficult decisions to help reshape the way that food moved across our industry. They're going to talk about the decisions that we had to make on how we look at things like food fraud, which we just heard about. They're going to have to think about decisions that we need to make on how we're looking at transparency and creating transparency for a better sustainable earth. These are all topics that are going to become really important for us to get right now, because in 30 years from now, the people that are working in our industry are going to be using the software that we develop today. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how Cargill has approached blockchain and distributed ledger solutions, and how we're looking at a principles-based approach, because we believe that grounding in some of these principles allows us to avoid some of the really big hype, so all of those news articles that we just saw, and really focus on what we're solving for. We have a joke within the team that the first rule of blockchain is you don't need blockchain. And the reason that we say that often is because we want to talk people off the ledge of a technology solution that has got a big hype and focus on what problems are we solving for. And so let's talk about some of the principles. The first is that industry partnerships are key. I was recently reading a Harvard Business Review article that talked about, this age of run fast and break things. That was Facebook's motto. The definition of agile development, all of these types of topics is going to really change in the very near future. And the reason for that is because the problems we're solving for are much more complex and require a lot more integration. When we think about nutrition, we think about food, we think about the different food companies, medical industry, we think about industries, we think about governments. Like bringing all of these groups together like we have in this room is not going to be an easy task to actually get to the root of like building scalable solutions that solve this for the world. And so building those partnerships are key. Cargill is working with some of our biggest competitors on this topic. We have brought together ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, and we've actually started to look at a blockchain solution that helps with trade paperwork that happens today. And the goal, and really the reason for bringing us together, and I can tell you it's not easy bringing those four large competitors of many, many years in one room together and agree on everything. But we also knew that it wasn't going to be one of us that was going to solve all the paperwork that happens in ocean transportation and how we actually process that paperwork. It needed some of the biggest players involved to help move the industry. And if we couldn't agree on it, not one of us was going to get ahead of the other. The second thing that we often talk about is open standards and platforms. So open standards, you heard me mention earlier GS1. Which is really looking at how you're defining open standards around product data. This is really important for us because it actually is building industry industry standards that allow us to build our solutions off of. If every company has their own version and definition, it's going to take us a lot longer. The other thing that we look at is open platforms. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but Cargill is built on building on open software platforms where we have invested into talent, developing blockchain solutions in Cargill, and they are writing code that they are giving back for free to the community. It's not the Cargill solution, but it's really the industry solution. And this is really important because this open platform allows us to come together and collaborate quicker versus us all trying to adhere to one person's software solution. Which leads me to the next topic, which is challenging the role of traditional technology companies. I can probably safely say that most companies in this room and even universities and governments have been approached by traditional software companies who are trying to sell their blockchain solution to us. You see it often with large software companies trying to say, we are building the solution for the future. We are going to help change the food ecosystem. They do a really good job of marketing. They spend millions and millions of dollars into this marketing. Yet, as I've had conversations across the industry, asking them how many food scientists do they employ? How many food supply chain people do they employ? Often the answer is 0. And that concerns me because now we're letting a commercial software company trying to dictate how our supply chains are going to act in the future and forcing us to follow a standard that may not work for our industry. And so we often say we need to challenge that. We need to understand what their motives are because it's very easy for a software company to commercially focus on trying to build the solution And if it doesn't work, they get to move on to something different, and they write that off as maybe, hey, we didn't succeed in that software solution, but we're going to try something else. We see it as if we are involved in helping build that solution as an industry, and if we fail, that line of failure is really short. We're the ones who feel that impact. We don't get to walk away and try something different. Like, we are the ones who are forced to figure out how to move grain and food products around the world to help feed people. So these principles for us as we look at this are really important because what it helps us do is ground us in the conversations that we've had. We've really been partnering across a lot of our customers and some of our partners to really start to try to develop the solutions that we can help bring together to the industry, and you see that listed here. So let's talk a little bit about making some of those principles practical and what we're doing today. So you heard me talk a little bit about the technology. Cargill is working on these open source solutions. Hyperledger is an open source software solution to compare, things. If you think about the internet, most of that's built on Linux, which is an open source solution, and you can go build your own web page on the internet and have it displayed to the world in a matter of seconds and minutes. Similarly, as we start to build solutions within these platforms, what it allows us to do is Cargill can be writing code, our customers can be writing code, our partners and others can be writing code into these solutions, and it allows us to get there faster and work closer together. And so as we think about different ways that then is distributed and how the data might look, we'll talk about another example where we have Cargill, we might have a competitor of Cargill, we have a shared customer of ours, and maybe a logistics company that helps get products from those different points. As you think about the way that data interacts today in our supply chains, it's very point to point. And so I can send data from me to Care, and if Care is our logistics partner, we can have a shared EDI connection. This is a typical way to do this, and you're able to move data. If we share it through somebody else, if I share data through Mara, we could have data that we're actually putting forward on EDI connections. But there's also data that the three of us share. That's really important. And the way that gets shared today is through spreadsheets, phone calls, emails, and a lot of different tactics. I've even heard fax, which I didn't know still existed. What I really think about, though, is if we can distribute this data throughout different circuits where we can share data amongst ourselves, and as that data starts to flow, we're able to think about what data is important for us to share amongst ourselves. So think about this example. If I am sending product to my customer, I need things like quantity, price, product number, PO number, destination, shipping date. These are all different types of data points that we need to capture. All that data is really important for our customer. The logistics supplier doesn't need to know the price. They don't really care about the PO number. They don't care about maybe contract balance. These are all different kind of data points that are irrelevant. And so being able to make sure that data still flows through the chain, and it needs to get to the person that needs to see it, but not shared with the people that don't need to see it, becomes really important on how we build that distributed network. When we think about other examples that we just saw, as we look at some of those handheld devices that are scanning products at a grocery store and loading that into the cloud, that is data that can be stored quickly and accessed quickly through the chain to allow for much quicker response rates. You can actually get information closer to real time than we ever have before if we connect these chains correctly. So I want to leave you with three things that are really important. The first is this continues to mature. Blockchain technology in our industry has not been built at scale. No matter what you see from marketing material or no matter what you see out there, it is not at scale yet today. As a matter of fact, in software terms, I would consider we're still only at like version 1.0. So it is still very new. The second is really think about the principles-based approach. As you work with your companies, and as a matter of fact, like just a show of hands, how many people in this room's company or industry is exploring blockchain today? Like who has heard of their company getting engaged? I got a couple here. Oh yeah, that's good. Yes. So I think as you start to go back to your companies and industries, like ask more about this, what your companies are doing. We are working across with some of the largest customers on these topics, and it's still in very early exploratory phases. But the use cases of what creates value is actually the things that we need more of. The technology, remember, is the easiest part. I think the last thing that I want to talk about is how we come together as an industry. I have 2 young kids. They're 7 and 5 years old. I think about 30 years from now, when they look back at this moment, I hope that they look at our industry and say, you guys made some really good decisions at that point, and it had to be difficult. I know it wasn't easy. You didn't understand the technology. You didn't understand the opportunities that lied in front of us, and you didn't know what the future was going to hold. But you focused on the principles. You focused on working as an industry because that was going to help solve this for the better of food safety, for trust in the system. And you didn't focus on who was going to beat who to the finish line and who is going to be the best company in blockchain. I think that these 3 things are really going to be important as we look forward. Thank you.